Hello there, fellow students. We are going to talk about a subject named as Fundamentals of Business Management. Though you have earlier studied two different units, in this unit we are going to talk about planning. This is Dr. Saket Bansal, and the overall course outcome out of this particular unit would be the students will be able to classify various types of plans and develop effective planning strategies. Now, my dear friends, you have already understood the different aspects of management. But being a fellow manager, you need to understand planning in much more detail, and hence, at the end of the lecture, the students will have a clear understanding of what actually a planning means. So, shall we start? Right on the go. A planning is generally taken as a tool. Whenever we talk about planning, it generally helps us in the course of action. Planning is often termed as a tool which is handy for the manager who generally face problem and need not be averted by it. So, in order to avert the problem, planning is often considered as a tool. Every enterprise which strives to survive and grow must plan accordingly, and hence, in order to avoid any repercussions, deadblocks, a good planning is always advised. Planning is dynamic. Now, most of us might be very well accustomed to the concept of a dynamism versus being static. When we talk about planning being dynamic, it simply means once a person has planned, it simply does not mean that there is no need to further revise the plan or it should be left untouched. When we talk about planning being dynamic, it simply means that we need to alter the plan or we need to have always be accustomed to the application of planning in order to execute in the most effective of the manner. Planning being dynamic in nature also helps a manager to stay afloat and on the foot in order to execute in the most appropriate manner. Planning is always a process where thinking before doing is concerned, and hence the planning is generally a proper technique which always keeps the people in the dynamic of the nature. Planning determines the course of action. Most of the time, which can simply mean that many other functions like organizing, controlling, directing, coordinating often needs a good structured plan, and hence planning is one of the most important aspects whenever we talk about post-com or any course of action. Planning is pivotal for any of the management functions and hence is given its due impetus and emphasis. Planning is highly important as it being a basic function of management. We always talk that in orderly procedure or a thoroughly thought out plan will always help us to achieve our objective and avert any unwarranted situation. Planning should always take place before doing, as a person who is planning to fail is generally failing to plan. My dear friends, whenever we talk about the execution, it is always important that planning is done in the most appropriate manner. Now let's talk about concept of planning. First and foremost, let us understand what a concept means. A planning is a systemized effort and generally determines objectives, alternatives, course of action, or even selection of best possible alternative that is available in order to choose from. First and foremost, let us understand a very continuous concept that it is a continuous activity. When we talk about planning being a drawing board action, that simply means we need to get back to the basic, we need to understand that it is highly important that all the concepts of planning are being taken care of. It becomes a continuous activity. A planner needs to have a mental and intellectual capability while planning. Being a continuous activity will require enough efforts, enough awareness, and capacity to execute the plan to the detail. A person who is planning need to be afloat, need to have always on the toes so that the planning can be comparative and effective. A planning is often considered to be very basic function of a manager. Doesn't matter whatever you do, doesn't matter wherever you are, a plan is always nearby. And hence, a manager, he he or she may be new but needs to plan accordingly. And it is one of the most basic function of the manager. A plan can be anything: planning the day of work, planning subordination, or even appointing someone to execute a particular task. Everything needs a basic plan, and hence it is always considered as a basic function for a manager. Most importantly, planning should be backed up by resource utilization. One cannot plan in hay and still does not have any resources. It is highly important that a planner needs to have a complete resource so that when they are utilized to the best of their ability, will give a subscript of utilization of resources for the planning. It is important that all the planning is being backed up by the resources which are going to be utilized during the execution of the work. So let's now draw into some of the definitions. Whenever we talk about the definition, it is highly important that we have some of the most well-known definitions. And we are going to talk about a definition here, which states planning is the fundamental management function, which involves deciding beforehand what is to be done, when is it to be done, how it is to be done, who is going to do it, and it is an intellectual process which lays down an organization's objectives, develops various course of actions by which the organization can achieve those objectives. It chalks out exactly how to attain the specific goal. You might get across several definitions of planning, but the definition we have discussed here generally gives us the pointers about planning, and hence it helps us how to achieve a desired specific attainable goal in the future. It generally it cannot predict an exact future, but still it is sufficient to give us a hint of the future, and hence planning forms a very integral and important part of any manager's armchair armageddon. Whenever we talk about repertoire, it is important that the planning is done in the most effective of the manner. So let's move forward and talk about what are the different objectives of planning. The first objective of planning is to reduce uncertainty. When we talk about future, a future cannot be foreseen and it is most of the times uncertain. And hence, it is completely up to the execution of planning to reduce the uncertainty of the future. It is highly important that planning should help any organization to plan it accordingly in order to have a future set of possible situations. A planning should be to the core, should be to the forefront, and to the pinpoint in order to avoid any uncertainty. A good planning brings cooperation and coordination. Planning is often bestowed upon with the responsibility to bring cooperation and coordination among various sections of the organization. It is important that a good planning should avoid tussle and conflict between the concerned organization's department. And a good planning will help you to avoid duplication of work. A good planning will help you to channelize the efforts and resources in the most efficient manner so that the objectives of any organization can be fulfilled. To economize operation. Now, my dear friends, let us be very sure. None of the resources are insatiable and non-exhaustible. And hence, it is important that the planning is done in order to economize the operation and have the optimum utilization of resources. Once a good planner executes the best of the plan, then the most of the possible alternatives are being judged on, the best possible utilization of resources is carried on, and hence serves the purpose of planning. To anticipate unpredictable contingencies. Now, first and foremost, let us understand the concept of contingencies. Whenever we talk about planning, it is important that a planner should be effective enough to anticipate what are the unpredictable contingencies that may crop up. A contingency often is a predictable outcome which is generally not considered, and hence it is up to the vision and anticipatory capabilities of any planner to have a pre-planned unpredictable contingencies. Many times contingencies are often termed as backup plans, and hence A good planner will always have not only plan A, plan B, but even plan C to achieve predetermined goals. Planning as an activity is aimed to achieve or fulfill the predetermined goals, and hence planning or a chalkboard plan should be made in order to have a predestined way of achieving the predetermined goals. It is highly important that the planning takes place in a particular manner so that the predetermined goals are reached in the most obvious manner without much of a hiccup. One of the objectives of planning is to reduce competition. The existence of the competition enables every organization or enterprise to go for a chance of growth. But my dear friends, a better planned organization will always be happier in terms of execution so that they can reach their goal of maximum profitability. It is up to the perfect planner to go ahead and think ahead of the competition so that a competition is left behind and we can win on the basis of planning. My dear friends, these are only some of the objectives of planning, and there can be many more, but we will discuss them in the course of action. I would like to thank you all for your apt attention at the end of the video. Let's meet in another video with the new knowledge and new understanding.